Okay, well, welcome to the Holocaust Memorial and Tolerance Center's Curators Corner. I'm Thorin Tritter. I'm the Museum and Programming Director at the Holocaust Memorial and Tolerance Center, located in the Wellwind Preserve in Glen Cove, New York. This online program is part of a weekly series that I think many of you know about, that we launched as a way to share information about particular objects in our museum's collection at a time when our galleries are closed. And I hope you are all safe and healthy and well. I'm grateful for your support during this time when our building's closed. Before I start, let me just urge anyone who has questions during my talk to type them into the Q&A feature of Zoom just by scrolling along the bottom or the top of your screen. I might not be able to get to them right away, but I will certainly make time at the end of my presentation to address any questions that you've posed. Today, I want to talk about a light bulb. A light bulb that's situated in the opening gallery of our museum. You can see from this photo, it's a pretty small object, narrower in circumference than the beer stein that's next to it in its display case. The light bulb was given to the Holocaust Memorial and Tolerance Center by Stella, Rachel, and David Gatenio, and we're very grateful for that donation and for their generous support for the Holocaust Memorial and Tolerance Center in general. Here's a slide that shows you both sides of the bulb, something you can't see normally in our exhibition. You can see it has a Star of David on one side and a menorah on the other. And you can see the remains of some blue paint that originally covered much more of the bulb. I'll come back to that. This is a light bulb that, as far as we know, is the last remaining part of a synagogue that once stood in Drama, Greece. It was saved by Karl Gatenio, who had lived in Drama in northern eastern Greece before World War II. Today, a city of about 45,000, Drama was a small town in 1939 when World War II broke out in Europe, with 1,200 Jews out of a total population of between 5,000 and 10,000. But Drama was also not far from Salonica, about 90 miles away, which by 1900 had one of the largest Jewish populations of any city in the world, with some 80,000 Jewish residents. In general, this area of northern Greece can trace a Jewish community to around 315 BCE, when Alexander the Great granted Jews some levels of equality under the law in his empire. An even bigger influx of Jews followed two events about 800 years later in the 15th century. First, the Ottoman Empire, the Ottoman conquest of Macedonia in 1430 ushered a new era of tolerance for Jews in this part of the world. And second, a little bit later, the expulsion of Jews from the Spanish Empire in 1492. A lot of those Spanish Jews moved to an area where they thought there was tolerance, like what became northern Greece. While we don't have figures for how many Jews arrived in Drama in the early 1500s, we do know that some 20,000 Sephardic Jews arrived in Salonica from Spain in the first years of the 16th century. So a massive influx that established the golden age of the Sephardic Jewish community in Salonica and the surrounding area in Drama started then. Salonica became known as the Mother of Israel to local residents and the Jerusalem of the Balkans to many non-Jews. The Sephardic Jews, who traced their roots back through Spain, were somewhat different from the Ashkenazi Jewish communities in Poland and Germany. Perhaps most notably, the Sephardic Jews of Greece did not speak Yiddish, like those in Poland, but instead spoke Ladino, a language with its roots in Old Spanish. The Jewish community flourished in northern Greece into the 20th century, but after World War I, the Greek government passed laws to Hellenize places like Salonica and Drama, segregating Jews and legalizing anti-Semitic activities that spurred an outward migration. Even with that outward migration, in 1935, Salonica was still home to 60,000 Jews, and the much smaller town of Drama had about 1,200. When World War II broke out, the Nazis did not look at first towards Greece. But in April of 1941, after a failed earlier attack by Italy, Germany invaded Greece across a wide front with troops coming through Albania, Yugoslavia, and Bulgaria. In less than a month, Greece capitulated. Germany left most of Greece to be occupied by the Italians, here shown in blue, but the town of Drama and the surrounding area, shown in green, went to Bulgaria, who had long sought control over that territory. 18 months later, in November of 1942, the Bulgarian government instituted its provisions of the Nuremberg Laws. Jews in the Bulgarian occupation zone were forced to wear the Star of David, to submit a record of their family's wealth and assets, and to live in prescribed zones where they had only limited time to be out of their house. The Bulgarians then started an initial roundup, particularly of young Jews, who were taken to forced labor camps in Bulgaria. Karl Gatenio was one of those Jews rounded up from Drama in 1942 and sent to a forced labor camp. His parents and two sisters remained in Drama, but he would never see them again. 5 months after he was taken east to Bulgaria, on the night of March 3rd, 1943, the Bulgarians arrested his family and all the remaining Jews of Drama, as well as the surrounding area from Kavala, Komotini, and elsewhere in their occupation zone. They were gathered in Drama and then sent by train to Lom, Bulgaria, before being loaded onto boats that took the Jews up the Danube to Vienna, and then by train to Treblinka. By the end of March, almost all of the 11,000 Jews who'd been rounded up from Drama and the surrounding area had been murdered. In a tragic twist that hints at the horrifying approach taken by the Bulgarians, the railway that carried the trains transporting Jews deported from Drama to Lom was constructed by some of the Jewish forced laborers who'd been imprisoned earlier. It may well have been that Karl Gatenio built the tracks on which his family was later deported. It was certainly the case in other examples. Amazingly, Karl Gatenio survived until the end of the war in that forced labor camp. When liberated, he initially stayed in the city of Sofia, where he met and fell in love with a woman named Stella. Once married, they made their way back to Drama, where Karl hoped to find his family. Karl was one of only 39 Jews from the pre-war population of 1,200 who eventually returned to Drama after the war. 39 from 1,200. It's a terrifying statistic, and yet one that was repeated across Europe. After not finding anyone at his home, his former home, Karl Gatenio went to the synagogue, what had been the hub of the town's Jewish community, but he found it empty and largely destroyed. He did find one unbroken bulb in the rubble and the mess of the building, which he picked up and which his family later gave to the museum. I have not been able to find any photographs of the synagogue in Drama, which was, as I understand it, converted into a private home after the war. I'm also not entirely sure what the bulb was used for in the synagogue. However, we have some photographs of other synagogues from Greece that may give us some clues, and a closer look at the bulb itself may also offer a hint. So first to some other Sephardic synagogues from the area. Here's a photograph of the 1927 opening of a new synagogue in Salonika. One of the things to notice here is the elaborate chandelier. Here's a more recent view of the same synagogue, which remains today as the only functioning synagogue in the city of Salonika, which once claimed more than 30 independent synagogue buildings. Again, you see the elaborate chandelier. Remember that Thomas Edison developed electric power generators in 1882, and that electric light bulbs came into use in Europe by the 1890s. For new buildings and synagogues built after those inventions, electric lighting was included in the design, and thus you see ornate lighting like that seen here. In older buildings, where candles or gas lights had been in place before electricity became available, you see simpler fixtures that often sought to convert the earlier candle holders into electric sockets. Given the relative simplicity of our bulb compared to the lighting in these photographs, I think we can assume this bulb came from a synagogue that had adapted its lighting to electricity and was built before the 1920s. Here's a photograph of a synagogue on the island of Rhodes that dates back to the 16th century. And here, although there's an elaborate chandelier and wall sconces, they're pretty simple compared to the ones that were in that last photo I showed. Indeed, you may be able to see that the wall sconces and the chandelier were originally designed for candles. Then the candle holders on the chandelier were turned upside down when it was wired for light bulbs, and the candles in the sconces were simply exchanged for light bulbs. Much closer to home, we have another similar example. This is a photograph of the Eldridge Street Synagogue on the Jewish Lower East Side, which had electric lighting added in 1907, more than a decade after the building was originally opened. And you can see a similar chandelier to the one used in Rhodes, where the candle holders were turned upside down when they were wired. One other thing you can find in both buildings that were rewired for electric light soon after it became available, and those that were designed with electricity in mind in the early 20th century, is a real celebration of the light bulb. In particular, bare light bulbs without shades or covers were often used because bare bulbs were pretty exciting at the time. For example, at the Eldridge Street Synagogue, the lights on the ark, where the sacred Torahs were held, were left bare. The plain lit bulb was enough of a decoration. Or look at the candelabra in this different view from one of the synagogues in Salonika. Our bulb may have been placed in one of these kind of candelabra fixtures. The elaborate design of our bulb does give me some pause, however. First, it looks like the blue covered much more of the light bulb than we see today. You can see residue of the bulb on the outer rim, as well as on the decorative leaves that encircle the central design, and on the lines that emanate from the central design. It looks like everything except from that central design were originally blue. It also appears that the central pattern, the menorah and the Star of David, were originally highlighted or colored in white or perhaps gold. You can see in places where some of the non-blue color remains. So this was a bulb that would have given a distinctive glow rather than a bright white light. Perhaps it would have been in a more prominent location, like those atop the ark in this photograph from a synagogue in Salonika. To be honest, maybe somebody out there has seen a bulb like this that I have not and will write to me to let me know more about it. It may well have been a memorial light turned on for the anniversary of a person's death, although it seems a bit large to me for that. Or perhaps it was the eternal light atop or in front of an ark. Although, again, those generally are used fixtures that relied on easily replaceable bulbs rather than something as ornate as this one. Unfortunately, at this point, we don't know exactly what he was used for. However, there is one more thing I wanted to share with you about this bulb that may tell us a bit about the synagogue it came from. A close look at the bulb shows that the menorah on one of its sides is not the traditional decorative menorah. Count the branches here. You see there are 9 branches on this menorah. The Bible describes that decorative menorahs should have 7 arms, not 9. And a look at the interiors of the synagogues of Salonika show those 7-armed menorahs are prominently displayed, not the 9-armed one that we have. The 9-armed menorah is specifically used for one particular Jewish holiday, Hanukkah, that celebrates the Maccabean revolt of 160 BCE against the ancient Greek king Antiochus IV, who had forbade Jewish religious practices in the kingdom of Judea, present-day Israel. The Maccabean revolt issued in the Hasmonean dynasty that destroyed Greek altars and reasserted Jewish practices in Judea until the Romans conquered them 130 years later. So the Greek synagogue that this bulb came from chose to honor that reassertion of Jewish practices in Judea over ancient Greek beliefs. Now, you might say, Thorin, you seem to be pushing it a bit far here, given that we're only talking about a picture of a menorah. But again, this is not the decorative menorah that you see in most synagogues. There's also one other bit of evidence I want to show you. On the other side, if you look closely, it's not just a Star of David. There's something in the middle. This is the Lion of Judah, another symbol of Judaism tracing back to one of the 12 tribes of Israel. Now, there are many versions of the Lion of Judah, and it's not all that uncommon to find both of these symbols combined, the Star of David and the Lion of Judah. But there is a striking similarity between the image on our bulb and the symbol that was used to mark the first Zionist Congress, organized in Basle, Switzerland in 1897 by Theodor Herzl, which called for a Jewish homeland in Palestine. You see here the symbol chosen for that first Zionist Congress, and around the edge it says in Hebrew, First Zionist Congress, Basel, and the year 1897. Here they are side by side, and I think you can see the similarities are not just by chance. Not only is the central lion the same, the dots within the, around the edge of the triangles are also the same. This is a bulb that took the Zionist symbol and implanted it on the light. And I will add that Theodor Herzl and the early Zionists embraced the Maccabean revolt in a way that previous Jewish thinkers had not. In Herzl's book, The Jewish State, that he published in 1896, he used the Maccabees to symbolize his hopes for the future, writing, "A wondrous breed of Jews will spring up from the earth. The Maccabees will rise again. We shall live at last as free men on our own soil and in our own homes peacefully die." So our bulb has both a celebration of the Maccabees through the inclusion of the Chanukiah and a symbol of the First Zionist Congress. This design makes me think it likely came from a synagogue that embraced the Zionist movement in the late 19th and early 20th century. You might well think, well, that doesn't narrow it down very much. But in fact, the Zionist movement divided the Jews of Europe in the early 20th century. It was hardly something that all Jews embraced. Many thought the Jews should focus their energies on strengthening their ties to their existing nations rather than promoting the fanciful need for an independent Jewish state. The Holocaust would, of course, change that equation dramatically. In drama, a Holocaust memorial was erected in 1999 to remember the Jewish community that largely has disappeared. On the top, it reads, "Remember and do not forget," and it's printed in Greek, Hebrew, and English. The body of the memorial then says, "The municipality of Drama does not forget the 1,200 Jewish citizens who were arrested on March 3rd, 1943, and were killed by the German conquerors." On the side, it lists the number of Jews lost from Drama and some of the other surrounding cities. Karl Gatenio, when he returned to Drama, tried to restart his life there, resettling in his boyhood town with his new wife and launching a new family. Their first son, David, born in 1946, would be the first Jew born in Drama after the war. But Drama was not the same place that Karl had known growing up. The Jews had been killed, and he moved away too, settling in America in 1951 in Detroit. Here's the family on their crossing on the USS Argentina, a Panama Pacific Line ship. Somewhere in their belongings, when this photo was taken, was the light bulb, a remnant of the Jewish community and Drama that they brought with them to America. Eventually, the bulb was passed down to David and his wife Rachel, who live here in Nassau County, and who donated it to the Holocaust Memorial and Tolerance Center. David told me that he still feels strong ties to Drama. Indeed, here's a photograph of David and his wife at the Holocaust Memorial a few years ago. But Drama no longer has the rich Jewish culture that it did before 1939. The bulb we display is a reminder of that culture and the loss that the Holocaust brought to us all. Okay, I'm going to stop there. If you have questions, please do type them in the Q&A box. Let me, as always, remind you of some of our upcoming programs. Next Wednesday, again at 1 o'clock, same as today, I will be leading my next Curator's Corner, looking at a copy of a pro-Nazi newspaper that we show in our gallery. And on Tuesday, June 9th, I want to draw your attention to a program that will be at 11:30 in the morning with Dr. Linda Burkhardt, HMTC's scholar in residence, who will present the next program in our Yiddish culture series, entitled The Art of Marc Chagall, War and Peace Through Yiddish Eyes. I hope you will join me for those presentations. You know, you can always find a full list of HMTC programs by going to our website and clicking under the Events tab. I also hope you will go to our website to make a donation to enable us to continue offering programs like this one, particularly when our doors are closed. Okay, well, thanks very much for joining me, and I look forward to seeing you at other HMTC programs again soon.